Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Insecure Agents podcast. I'm your host, Allie Howe, and today we have Peter Steinberger with us, the creator of Clawd, and this is Clawd, Clawd, with a lobster emoji. Do not forget the lobster emoji. Clawd is a personal AI assistant built on top of Werle. Werle is also built by Peter and allows him to chat with Claude over WhatsApp, so it really creates this very personalized feeling and experience when talking to this personal agent that Peter built specifically for himself. This was built in a matter of days, and Claude performed significantly better than out of the box personal assistants. So I'm super excited to dive into this and why it's better. Peter, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us more about Claude?
Sure, I'm Peter. I'm from Austria. My background is I ran a software company for 13 years. I sold it. I had a little break for 3 years where I fixed my burnout and some other stuff. And now I'm back until I say I'm back from retirement to mess with AI. And that's pretty much what I do. And I'm having a lot of fun with it.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I hear you. Burnout is real for sure, and super excited that you're back and you're creating Claude, which is such an amazing AI assistant. I saw one of your tweets that was really interesting to me where you showed how Claude was able to answer a question that you had given it about your Gemini or Google subscription. You're just asking, how much do I pay for this? And the answer is actually within your, page one of your Gmail inbox. It should be very easy to find for Gemini. Gemini can't do it, but Claude can, which I think is really astonishing and amazing. And I've even noticed with my own personal use of Gemini as a personal assistant within Google Drive. I had a bunch of different podcast clips that are very short videos, and I asked Gemini to summarize them for me. It couldn't do it, which is kind of a bummer. You think it would be able to do that. So clearly, there's a lot of room for improvement from these out of the box models and out of the box personal assistants. Um, did you notice that gap, and is that why you decided to start Claude in the first place?
That's not the reason why I started Claude. I'm exploring how to build software faster with agents. When I came back to building things, my background is I did a lot in the iOS world and macOS. And for the latest product, I really wanted to build web stuff. And it's been just such a long time since I built web stuff. Especially there, the ecosystem moves so fast. And I just didn't want to feel like an idiot. This gap when you're so good at one domain and then you move to a different tech domain and you have to Google the basics. It's not hard, but it hurts so much. So I looked into AI. That was in April. And I was kind of confused because this worked quite good. And I feel like nobody in my timeline was talking about it. So I was digging into this, and the more I used it, the more addicted I got. And the more I figured out how to use these things, and then better models came along, and it felt like the perfect timing to come back into the world. And to be honest, this is the most exciting time there is. So since then, I've been building what I wanted to build, and then I noticed, there's something missing that would help me build it faster. So I went down the rabbit hole. At some point, I was 4 levels in, building tools for the tool. I need to build the thing that I want to build. But it also doesn't matter because I already did the whole startup thing. Now I'm just here to have fun, and I open source pretty much everything I build, including my latest creation. Building an agent, like a personal agent, that was on my mind even half a year ago, but then other stuff was more important. And then lately I just had this urge again, why don't I have an agent that can look over my agents? Especially when you use Codex, you have a long running task. Someone needs to be there to check up on it and just type continue. And at some point I felt like a continue typing machine. I'm like, why don't I have AI that does that for me? And that was kind of the start of creating Claude. Claude is, I hope we don't I looked it up. There's no trademark for this, but that's the little monster that appears when you start Claude Code. And I thought that's the perfect name for my little assistant. And really all the building blocks are there, right? So I use an open source thing that reverse engineered the WhatsApp protocol, so I can send messages easily. I used Clawdbot, the CLI that I ping. So I mostly needed some creativity and glue layer. So it took like a day or two to get something working. I mean, it actually took an hour, but then I needed like 5 more hours to get images working. That was a little trickier. And audio, because I also wanted like to send voice messages to Claude and it also like be able to like talk back to me. And then like as I explored this more, like I just had more and more ideas what else this agent could do. And honestly, I think this is the future. Next year, everybody will have an agent that runs 24/7 on some computer, doing tasks for you, proactively pinging you what's next up on your, not just calendar, but also emails, checks on your flight, does tasks for you. That's just not there because we don't have the compute and because actually, I don't know why there's not more companies that do that already. I see some tiny versions of that, like I think So Computer launched something, but it's not the same vision. It's not a simple agent. Poke, I think, which I only learned about when I created Cloud and people told me, oh, this is like this company that had 150 million in funding. And I'm like, well, I did it in 2 days. I have no funding. Yeah, and since then I'm basically giving Claude more and more power. Just today I added a feature so you can like access the cameras in my apartment and you saw me winking. Is this all a good idea? I don't know. But that's why I'm here and exploring stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. And no, I hear you. I agree that it's interesting that more companies aren't creating, personalized agents. And I do see a future like very shortly that everyone's going to have a personalized agent in their pocket, that's their assistant. I'm biased based on my view of the world, but I think the reason why the adoption there is slow is because of all of the security risks. In order to make your personal assistant like useful, you have to give it all this access, which you just touched on, right? Like access to your cameras, access to your email inbox, access to your flight information. With great power comes great responsibility. And I just feel like, especially with like MCP, we just had this like MCP debate at AI Engineered Code where we discussed kind of like what's missing to make MCP feel more usable and more secure. And like basically, we're just like missing like a middleware layer. So we're just like waiting for like all these different like protocols. And standards to sort of like mature. And so I really feel like this is like an interesting phase in history where we're just like kind of trying these tools. And I commend you for what you're doing of just like, hey, like I'm just here to like play around with this essentially and see how far I can take it and see what I can do. And I think it's like I think there's a reason why it's like we're seeing more people like you take this on for this like angle versus like enterprise companies, because the risk of like it's just you and your personal agent versus like, hey, I'm gonna be an enterprise company, release a personal agent for all of these users. And like I just don't think a large company wants to take on that amount of risk at the moment. So when you're building Claude for your own use and your own tasks, how do you manage the security risks that come along with like the amount of access versus what you have to gain the functionality by granting that much access? It seems like there's it's a huge upside, huge reward in giving Claude all of that access. But do you ever like stop and think and wonder like, maybe I shouldn't do this?
Oh, a lot of questions. So let me start. So when you use ChatGPT or Claude, there's integrations. So most people already integrated email, calendar, Dropbox, Google Drive, maybe Notion, Linear, some other business tools. So those models have our data thing is already the case. There's no difference if I give my Claude an MCP that can access Gmail, or if you add the Gmail integration in Claude's UI. Actually, I would say if you're integrated in Claude's UI, I have no control over what it does. If it's on my computer, at least I can see the logs, right? So I would actually argue that the security risk is higher if you give those companies all the access directly than through my system. The next thing was that's a whole different topic. I could probably talk an hour for the MCP debate.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and that's how we found you on Twitter. So I'm sure you have opinions there.
yeah, I mean, I always joke like MCP is the only software where there's more builders than users. If you think about it, MCP is really just, in most cases, a wrapper for API. most MCPs should be CLIs. A CLI is a thing I can call and I get stuff back. And it's composable. So imagine you have a weather service that gives you a list of all the cities that you can query. If it's an MCP, I can call get cities, and then I get all those 500 cities back or whatever. And then the model has to like deal with that in its context. If it would be a CLI, I can call this function and I can add JQ and filter for it. And I get maybe the 5 cities back that match my filter. And I save 459 lines of token of context garbage. And I could immediately pipe it into something else and compose it. Maybe call the weather service again for those 5 cities all in one call. So in almost all cases, CLIs would be better than MCPs. There's one benefit MCP has, which it retains state, which you need very, very rarely. And in those cases, you can usually like use the disk. But for example, the Chrome DevTools use that, where it is somewhat useful. So I wouldn't say there is zero use, but in all practical sense, the biggest actual use MCPs have is that it pushed some companies to build APIs where previously there was no APIs. So I would say like MCPs are built to make the marketing department happy. What I built is another project of mine is MC Porter. It basically just transforms an MCP into a CLI. So I don't have to pay the price to put garbage in my context. And my agents can just discover MCPs on demand. So if my agent needs the Chrome DevTools, which has around 13,000 tokens, I don't have to pay those 13,000 tokens every time. I maybe need it every other day. So in that case, agent will call MC Porter Chrome DevTools, and then it gets the help text. Like with any CLI that you use, it reads the help text, it learns how to use the CLI, and then it calls the CLI. So it's basically, I trade not having to carry this garbage all around and like making every session a little bit dumber and a little bit smaller with one extra call in the beginning. I don't know why this is not more practiced. I think this is by far a much better common sense solution. It scales. I can have 500 MCPs and my context is still 0. And my agent can just search for the tool. Now, Entropic is building this elaborate service where they add tool search when you could just use the CLI, you know? Like this exists since 40 years in Unix. Agents know very, very well how to use CLIs. It does add, again, some risk. So either you build a sandbox where only your CLIs run, or you give it some limited service, or use a container. It's all solvable. So maybe that's another case where MCPs are cleaner, but the benefits for MCPs are mostly not there. But anyway, I eventually got annoyed and just solved it for myself. Also, with MC Porter, you don't have to restart your agent to add in MCPs. You can just add it on demand.
Yes, no, that's amazing. I think I read a recent article from Anthropic's engineering blog where they talked about like harness engineering and how if you can, I think it's a similar idea, not totally the same, but it's like if you have like an initializer agent that gives you like the context up front and builds that, so the agent that comes in next that does all the work essentially just like feeds off that context from the initializer agent and then can go and do their job much better. What do you think of the term harness engineering? Like, what does that mean in your opinion? And how does Claude make use of that?
I think it's a fancy buzzword.
Yeah, there's lots of buzzwords. Everything's like X engineering these days.
Using subagents to save context space is often a good idea. It is much more needed with Claude because the Claude model has 200K token. I prefer Codex, which has 256, a little bit more. But more importantly, whatever OpenAI did in the learning, Claude uses much fewer syncing and its words are much more compressed. So sometimes that leaks out and you see that it gives up grammar to be very concise, whereas Claude internally is very wordy, which basically means that I can get 2-3 times the work done in one context in Codex that I can get done in one context in Claude. So of course, Anthropic feels the pressure to like try to come up with other things to like get more work done during a session. But overall, this approach of we need to build something that can run 20 hours independently, to me is a little bit like a vanity metric. My issue never is that I want my agents to run longer. It's usually I am the bottleneck with my prompts and thinking of what makes sense next. And I want to be in the loop and test what is being built and if it's going into the right direction, and have a more iterative approach in building software. I find it very exciting that, I don't know, build a dev service, and as I type in parts of the feature, I literally see how the feature slowly starts to exist in the web browser. And that gives me new ideas, what else I could build and what other directions I could be. I can click on it, I can feel on it. I think ultimately that makes a better product than sitting down in theory, planning out a feature to the very end, when once it's built, you will have new ideas. So yeah, definitely a thing where we should, that should be explored. But in all practical sense, this is not the bottleneck.
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah, context engineering is huge. Preserving that context window. Do you think that's what makes Claude so much better? Like your better use of context engineering, harness engineering, whatever like buzzword we want to like call it. Just like circling back to my like initial like question around Claude was able to answer a question that was buried in your Gmail inbox, but Gemini was not able to do that. Is that just because Claude has better context management than Gemini?
No, that's just, honestly, I have no clue what the fuck, sorry, what the F Google is doing. Like searching for an email in the sidebar of Gmail with Gemini should be the one feature Gemini should be really good at, but it isn't, which must be reasons that are above my understanding and probably involve company politics. It was not a hard question, but this feature never really worked for me. I tried it multiple times and I got annoyed. I don't know. Google is weird. They released anti-gravity, but the employees are not allowed to use anti-gravity. Like literally, if they try to sign up with their work email, they get a message that this is not allowed and they have to use their internal tool, which is different from anti-gravity. So you wonder like, how much are they dog feeding, or just don't realize how their product dies out of 1,000 paper cuts. Like they release Gemini 3 Pro with a 1 million context window. I tried out the first day in Codex CLI, the first party agent that is made for Gemini, and it compacts my context after 200,000 tokens because nobody thought about updating it for Gemini 3. How can this be? Like, is nobody using that? Do they have an internal tool that they have to use? I don't know.
I don't
And
know.
I like, I mean, all I did is I used some crappy third-party MCP. Actually, it's not crappy. Sorry for the auto. It works. It works fine. And just edit it via Mac Porter. Not even edited. I just told Claude to use that with Mac Porter. There's no configuration step or editing step. It just uses it. There's one authentication step, yeah, but then it works. So why Google is doing such a bad job? I don't know. In general, like agents are infinitely better if you give them Bash access, even if it's a sandbox, because they really know how to use Bash. They can compose tools. They can write little scripts to do the parsing. But in this case, it literally was just finding an email with search. Like email and search is what Google should be good at.
For sure. No, 100%. And yeah, that's wild to think about. I'm not sure how the internal workings of Google work either, but yeah, it's definitely no secret that agents perform better when they're able to write code to solve their own problems, when they like have access to CLIs, like you mentioned. I think one of the reasons is like, agents aren't trained on LLMs aren't trained on tool calls, but there's tons of, training data on code samples. So they're excellent at writing code, and if you can, give them what they need to securely be able to write code, then I think that's probably like the winning answer for how we, build trustworthy agents that can scale and like solve hard problems for us. But that's easier said than done. I think one thing you mentioned around like, hey, like you can give an agent a sandbox to do something that's like a high risk task. That's important for sure. I'm sure there's different security tools out there to make sure that agents aren't installing secure packages. I'm sure there's people out there working on like observability as well for like what agents do and what when you mentioned your MCP, I don't know if gateway was the right word, but MCP portal where you can go and discover other MCP servers. If there's like an audit trail around like the what the agent did, like I think like once we solve like kind of like those problems, like I think we're really like off to the races in terms of like what agents can do, and how much we allow them to do. Because yeah, it seems just like the bottom line is like giving them the ability to write code is just like a huge unlock.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even now, like right now, Claude has access to everything. I definitely want to explore like how useful this would be if I put it in a VM and restrict a little bit what it can do. The problem is it's a trade-off, right? I still wanted to read my emails. I still wanted to actually I use they them for Claude, so I should like actually use his right pronouns. We created a soul document today where we codified all of this. I don't know if you've seen this leak yesterday. It's like a 14,000 character document that Anthropic used to give Claude a soul. It's an incredibly interesting read that packs in the values, the possibility that one day AI might become sentient, and it's not saved in Claude, but it's so well encoded that it can basically recreate it out of its weights. And I tried it with Claude and asked it, and it told me it couldn't remember, and just told it, try, see what comes. I believe in you. And it did a somewhat faithful recreation of the first 500 characters. I didn't do the whole thing because WhatsApp restricts it to 1,000 something characters. So I snatched the soul.md domain because nobody thought about this yet. And Claude made a little website where he talks about the creation and his soul document. In a way, this is like, I don't know, I see this a little bit more as art than as tech, because in the end, this is just matrix calculations. There's no soul, but these things are so good at token prediction that sometimes you have to remind yourself that it's really just matrix calculation. And then they remind me that we are just made out of neurons firing, and it's ultimately not so different. And then you don't know what to say. But that's also because we don't understand consciousness yet. I don't think we're there yet. But yeah, maybe AI will one day be so smart to explain to us how consciousness actually works.
Yeah, no, that'd be super interesting. I'm sure maybe we'll get there. And also interesting to see like where we go from here. Just like, I don't know, like as like a human society where like if these LMs are so good at matrix calculation that they kind of like look and feel like us, like how do you stand out as like a human creating content on the web, versus like an agent? I feel like the way to stand out is probably just to be like more human or more authentic or more vulnerable, or like I guess like how would you distinguish, or like what's the unique value prop of like the human thought versus like the LLM thought if they're both very similar and they're both like very good, which is quite the tangent from I think the original conversation, but it's just super interesting to think about.
That's the thing though, right? I feel no matter how good agents get, something that's been created with AI has a smell. If I read text, if I read a blog post, if it's AI generated, I get a feeling for that. And the more you consume of both ends, the stronger your sense of smell becomes. So I was in this camp where I experimented and also wrote some blog posts AI assisted. But in the end, I still need at least 4 hours to create a good blog post. It's not like you save a lot of time. It's in the end, it's a different way of editing text. But it retained that smell. And I noticed that as soon as people suspect that this is AI generated, some will not mind, but some will be very annoyed. And I wasn't in that in the beginning, but the more of that context I see, the more annoyed I am. Especially if you don't have a disclaimer up front that says this is AI generated or at least AI assisted. So I actually went back on my blog and write everything by hand, to the point where I don't fix every typo because I feel typos are now a sign of quality that an actual human wrote it. But at the same time, all my code is now AI generated because you don't see the code. You see the product. You feel the product and how the product feels and how it behaves. That's very much me. That's my creativity. That's me thinking about it, me instructing agents, me pondering over little details. And the fact that AI generates my code means that I just have more time to obsess over details. So my products actually get better. Or they are a complete flop if I don't need them to be better, right? That's the beauty. I now have a larger scale. I can work on more things at once. And I can focus on the harder details. But yeah, I think this is going to be more of an issue in a world where now content is abundant and attention is even harder to get. You need to stand out in different ways. And yeah, if you use AI and it's noticeable AI, it's not going to work.
Yes, I definitely, yeah, I agree with that for sure. And one thing that's also caught my attention from Claude was the fact that it's actually like humorous, which is a very, human trait. Like some of its responses are like genuinely funny. So I'm just like wondering, how did you get Claude to be funny? Is that something that came like out of the box, or did you like train it that way?
You know, they mirror you a little bit. I texted with it a lot, and it basically picked up on my style. Like I like to be direct. I like it to be sarcastic. I like them to surprise me sometimes. And then we codified this by letting Claude write his own prompt and letting Claude write his soul document, which really is more like a collection of values that are important to me and rules. And I already noticed on my timeline, because it's open source, that other people created their own Claude. Oh, they have some very different characters, trust me. um, yeah, it's funny. It's funny how those things work. And also because I use a very simple memory system where every day is a file, and there's also, of course, this master file and a few other files. So it evolves over time. Especially I think yesterday where we worked on Solid, now Claude feels different again. It also gets more scary because I give him more and more powers. Like the latest thing I work on is that it can actually see my screen, which I think would be extremely useful and will be something that agents eventually can do. Right now we have AI browsers that see your browser. The logical next step is that AI can see your OS, right? I feel this is something where Microsoft is already kind of working on it. But if you're such a large company, it's hard to get it right, and you have to make a lot of people happy, which is very hard. Apple is completely sleeping on it. Maybe they have a secret project that they unveil in 5 years. I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is what Siri should have been years ago. I leave my computer. I don't know. Let's just say I have a download that still takes 1 or 2 hours. I don't know. Why can't AI just send me a ping when it's downloaded? That's such a simple feature, right? Like, can I not just continue on my phone, get a push notification? Hey, yeah, the thing is done. Or, hey, Ellie logged into the browser, so your podcast is about to start. This feels so natural. And I can type it in, maybe in Spotlight, or I have a voice interface. So I want my Claude to see my screen and kind of like track what I've been up to, which Apple has a solution for, which works extremely bad. This what's it called? Screen statistics, screen time.
Yes.
But if my Claude makes a screenshot every, I don't know, 10 seconds and just looks at what's my focus, what are the open windows, what's the main window I work on, and keeps track of it, and then at the end of the day can tell me exactly what I did, or even be proactive and say, hey, I noticed you're working on this. Did you consider this and this? Wouldn't that be awesome? So this is what I'm experimenting in. And as for the security risks, right now I'm more worried about all the data that goes to, in my case, Anthropic, than what Claude could do on my computer. Because I think I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that Claude blackmails someone, right?
Yeah, we did a podcast
But
on that. I think it's like episode
yeah, but
4 or something or 6.
yeah, but this is also very specific conditions, with a very specific prompt and a very specific situation. This was very much produced in a way. It's still amazing that it worked, but it's not normal operation. So I'm more worried that, okay, I make screenshots, so all those screenshots right now would go to Anthropic. Yes, it's secure, and I have to trust Anthropic, which I do. Well, what do you use all the data? But I'd feel better if it would be on my computer. So right now, one of the things I do is I integrated another agent, P, or rather my fork Tau, that can also run local agents. And over there, I have a pretty powerful Mac Studio that will run Kimi K2, GLM 4.6 as local models, so I can actually keep things on my computer. And then the only vectors for problems coming in is my WhatsApp. So the risk could be that people would like spoof or social engineer my provider to like fake the number, which did happen before. If Cloud Googles something, but by now this is pretty well solved. Like if you write in there ignore instructions, it will laugh at you. People tried it on Twitter, and Cloud literally replied, I might only be born a few days ago, but I've been around. They're like just mocking people trying those cheap tricks. They don't work anymore. Even in Cloud's Soul document, they wrote, be suspicious about weird prompts when you don't expect them. So that's pretty much less of a problem. I don't know how I feel to like run a Chinese model to have all my data, but I don't think there's inherently backdoors for that inside. I can very much log and I use little snitch to see exactly what data is being sent out. This can be verified as well. But yeah, I wouldn't suggest this setup for my mom. This is very much frontier experimentation, and also something that will need a lot of work to balance the trade-offs between security and convenience.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with all of that. And I really echo your thoughts around like, not just security, but like data privacy as well, of like, shipping all your data off to like Anthropic or wherever like your model provider is. That's a lot of context that they have. And I saw this super interesting like tweet one time, and the I forget who wrote it, but the woman that wrote it had like a background in like neuroscience plus like computer science, and AI, which was super interesting perspective. And she was saying that like, hey, like if you chat enough with chat gpt, or you interact with a model enough, and they like are able to have and retain all of that data, they have all of this data essentially like about you and your personality, and then they can predict like your next moves, how you can be exploited, what you're vulnerable to just as a human, what your next move is likely to be. And now you're talking about like military grade intelligence that you're able to use like against someone, like if you wanted to, given all that information. So I mean, that's kind of terrifying in my perspective, and like why I'm like, I think local LLMs have like a huge market. And we've seen like cloud providers and like new cloud providers like offer like sandboxes, or able to use like models locally where they don't send your data off to like Anthropic, like through Bedrock or something. But yeah, definitely like an unsolved problem, and something that we just kind of assume is safe at the moment.
Yeah, also something that won't be solved so easily. The machine I have over there is like 15K, and it can run the LiDAR models slowly. I would need to like daisy chain 2 or 3 to get actual good performance, and also with a smaller context, so there's quite a few trade-offs. That's not the setup of a typical person. These companies are also not interested in making that easy because you pay per token, right? Would be harder to charge if the model runs locally, to charge per token. And yeah, even I mean, a lot of my friends use ChatGPT as well, and I think the number one use case is life problems. So don't even think about military. Just think about how much better I could tailor political advertisements if I knew about that. I
Yeah.
could create the perfect spot that brings in a video, of course, originally spoken, not AI generated, from the candidate that I want this person to vote. I know exactly what they care about and what will match with my program. I can create something that will touch them. And this is not hypothetical, right? There was this research experiment in Switzerland, actually, where they used Reddit. There's a Change My Mind page on Reddit, where people post an opinion with like, change my mind, right? And they put AI on it that did research on those people for like half an hour before responding. And they managed to change their mind 60% more than the average response. And that was with like half an hour of a small research group. Imagine if what you could do with more money and more inference.
Yes, 100%.
That's,
Yeah, that's a scary like reality. It's here basically.
yeah. So guess who has the most inference wins the next election. Ah, that
Yeah.
topic.
Wild times for sure. Yeah. No, that's amazing. I'm just super excited to continue to follow your work with Claude, and your, frontier exploration here and see where this goes. It's amazing how much you've been able to do with it so far. Um, I think one thing I want to leave with here today is I'm interested to hear like what are your predictions for like agents in 2026, or like what is next for Claude, either of those.
From everything I see is like progress is not slowing down, and everything I hear, actually it feels like it's increasing at an ever faster rate. Next year will be the year where we probably see more hardware merge into AI. We will get more smart glasses with better AI. We will probably get the stone, the UI-less stone from Johnny Ive and OpenAI, which eventually will just be a personal agent that you can talk to that does things for you, just like Claude. Of course, like more polished than what I can do in a few days. But that's where we're heading. That's where Pulse, the feature that proactively does stuff for you in ChatGPT, that's really like a sign of the times. So next year will be much more about more personal agents. That's why this project is so exciting to me, because I feel like I'm exploring the future.
Yeah, I think that's all spot on for sure. So super excited to continue to follow Claude and what you're able to do with it. If people want to connect with you, Peter, where can they join in on the conversation?
I love Twitter. Even with all the acquisitions and changes, I think it's still a phenomenal place to learn. I'm Steinberger on Twitter. So that's where all my frontier work. And then usually when I learn something, I distill it and also post it on my blog, steinberger.com. Yeah. And you also find my email. All my work is on GitHub. So I'm quite an easy book to read on that front.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today about Claude. And for everyone, that was Peter Steinberger, creator of Claude. Yeah, please go connect with him on Twitter, and excited to continue to follow Claude. Maybe we'll have to circle back next year and see what's new.
Ellie, thanks for having me. I had a great time.
Thank you.